What's up everyone, Mike here, back with another video. So today's demo I'm particularly excited about. One of the things with Drupal is both that it's highly configurable and powerful, but that also means a lot of time spent in UIs, clicking around, configuring and setting things up. What if we can make that faster using AI? So what we're going to look at today is one such area, and that's content modeling. That's the time you're really spending going into the site, building content types, building vocabularies, adding fields, and configuring everything to really set you up for success down the line. And to do that, oftentimes individuals, companies, whatever it may be, in the early planning phases, they're actually building those out or planning those out somewhere else. And a great example of that is just having everything in a spreadsheet. Using a spreadsheet provides a great opportunity to work with clients or internal stakeholders and really iron out exactly what all your content's going to look like, what kind of field it is it required, optional, how many values does it accept, even how you're going to name and label and describe those fields. But then comes the process of actually getting that into your Drupal site. And for me personally, I'd rather skip this phase every time. And so we're starting here with an actual spreadsheet that Acquia has built and maintained over the years, which is a great template for doing this exact type of thing. But rather than using like some of their importer tools that they've built into this, we're going to do it all with AI. And I'll show you a lot of the advantages to that along the way. So let's get started. I'm starting with a pretty vanilla installation of Drupal CMS. The only changes I've made to it really is I've installed Tool API, which is the module that I've built and partly what I'm doing this video today and want to highlight. Tool API is really around defining callable actions in Drupal in a way that not only can you use in user interface, but that AI can clearly understand. And to do so, it really just focuses on describing the inputs, describing the outputs, and describing the results, not only in language that machines understand, but also in human language. The other module today that we're going to be using is this MCP module, which is the protocol that we're going to use for the AI assistant to speak to the site to be able to call those tools. And lastly, we're going to be using Claude Desktop. I would say far and away, Claude Desktop has been the most capable tool caller. And so I would recommend if you want to try to do a similar testing or similar demonstration, I would start here. And I'm going to be using Sonnet 4.5, which is kind of the middle level of their latest models. I should also note that I'm not going to walk through the setup of these modules or how you connect Claude to your site in this video. If you're interested in that, definitely go check out my last video, which is a step-by-step setup of not only Drupal CMS, but everything that gets you to this point where you have Claude speaking directly to your site. So like any magician, before I make the elephant appear, I'm going to show you all sides of the box. So let's come over here to the website. We'll click around. I'm going to refresh. You can see there's nothing here. We'll go to content types. We'll refresh. You can see there's nothing here. The only thing we've pre-set up, and again, it's mostly because we're using everything right out of the box from Drupal CMS, are the various media types, though it technically can do a pretty good job generating that as well. So let's jump back to Claude and we'll start with our initial prompt. We're going to say create all vocabularies, content types, and fields on my Drupal site from the provided spreadsheet using Drupal MCP tools. Make sure to use MCP tools to understand any existing entity types, bundle, and field definitions. I'm going to go ahead and get this started and then I'll provide a little bit more context. So one thing I'm going to point out is I'm going to add this timer here, and that's because this does take a little while. I want you to see how much time it's actually taking, even if we have some time jumps in the video itself. But in terms of this prompt, it's honestly really simple. And so what is happening is because our tools are defined very well, we're giving it very minimal prompting and we're saying, here's a list of all the tools you have available. Go figure out what you need to do. And in fact, you could probably even remove the second sentence and have the same success. But what I have found at times is Claude starts to wander and it'll start using Drush or trying to write other scripts or do anything. And we really wanted to just use the tools from the Tool API. Not only will it be more reliable, but then it can oftentimes self-correct a lot better than it will if it's just writing its own scripts or trying to do Drush commands. The other thing I should call out here is that, again, we're just using a vanilla list of tools and a simple prompt and the power of AI with MCP to figure it out. If I was using this more in a professional environment, I would wrap a lot of these tools in agents. And the reason for that is you can really simplify your context windows based on like, here's a smaller subset of tools, and here's what I'm asking it to do. Go do your thing. Instead of letting it in like one giant context window, try to build out all of these at once. And what we might see is that it actually hit its limits from time to time when it's trying to build out this amount of stuff. And you'll see the history drop out. And I just have to tell it to continue. And it'll take a couple minutes to figure out what it was doing, and then it jumps right back and finishes. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. There's been times where I've had to tell it to continue once or twice or 3 times even, and other times it'll make it through the whole thing without ever doing that. So we'll see how it goes today. And it might be also too that, again, maybe you just ask it to do one content type at a time or one entity type at a time. But the idea of bundling stuff in agents should alleviate a lot of that. And the other advantage to agents is not only can you narrow it down to like a subset of tools doing one specific thing, like here's my content type builder agent, here's my field configurator agent, here's my translation agent, whatever it may be. You can also potentially use smaller models, or you can use those agents to describe stuff in your prompts that maybe are around your own personal best practice or some of the nuance to how your individual site's set up. So there are a lot of advantages to not necessarily just dumping out all the tools available, but instead putting those tools inside of agents and then surfacing your agents for this to use. But for sake of demo, and again, because I want to show off this idea that well-defined tools are really the key to unlocking a lot of really efficient and effective AI, that's why we're taking this approach today. So as you can see, it got through the initial steps that it needed to parse out the file. It did some initial work in just seeing what was available on the site currently. Checked some information about what it needs to configure fields and bundles and so forth, getting the different bundle definitions. And then it starts to add the actual bundles for the vocabularies. So if we jump over to here, click in, you can see we now have taxonomy vocabularies, but our content types are still empty. So let's jump back here to Claude. So now the vocabularies are finished. It's going into creating content types. Okay, so it's now completed creating the bundles themselves, and we're at around the 5-minute mark, and it's now jumping into creating the actual field storage. And after it completes the field storage, you'll see it jump into adding individual instances. But we'll see if we hit any roadblocks along the way in terms of it just hitting its context windows. If it happens, it tends to be around this point where you might see it happen. So you can see it's starting to hit its wall. And again, this is often a sign that your context window is just getting too large. There's probably some things we could do to shrink some of the extra text that is coming back and forth from tools. But overall, this would be an advantage, again, of using agents, because you could split out these into their own separate windows. And that means the amount of information being passed to and from the assistant itself is a lot less, because it's giving off subsets of things it wants it to do. The agent can churn on it, and then the agent can return just the result it needs, instead of the assistant kind of seeing all of the back and forth that happens for each and every tool call. So I guess as we're going to see this stop in a little bit, and we'll just tell it to pick up again. But I think from like a performance perspective, you would see a lot better performance isolating that, or just asking it to do it, content type by content type. We'll do a few commands after this is finished where I'll show you individual calls, and you'll see the performance difference when you're asking it to do like a small amount of things versus when you're asking it to, process the entire spreadsheet at once. Okay, so this is the first time it's tapped out, and that's where it's hit its limit. It's probably a good thing because it was really getting a lot slower than I would have preferred. Sometimes it's actually finished, I would say, in around that 15-minute mark. Other times you can see it might just be the way it went about certain steps where it provided that much more context and it really starts to stall. So I'm going to give it the same prompt again and give it a little bit more. Just tell it to continue where it left off, but give it the same prompt again. So now it's figured out that it needs to add a few more field storages. And once that's complete, you'll see it jump into creating the actual fields on the bundles. So it looks like it's done at the completion and it's done creating all the fields. And now it's just doing a few checks to verify that everything's complete. And I'm actually going to go ahead and pause it at this point because I want to see how it did without it needing to go back and audit itself. So we're going to stop this. And then we're going to go back over here and we're going to refresh. And then let's just check a few different points and see how things look. So here's my article content type. I've got my article type, body, categories, display author, image, media, tags, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll go over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is right because title field won't display there technically because it's just part of the entity label. So we've got the right amount of fields. Let's check a few and see on like required versus not required. So in our case, body is required, display author is not required. So we'll go in here, click edit, limited to 1, required, true, that's good. Oops, let's go back and then click display author, should be optional, that's correct, and limited to 1. Now let's check on the canonical. So it looks like we want to have allow multiple tags, or unlimited amount of tags, I should say. So we'll go back over here. And we'll click tags. And you can see it allows unlimited. Same as optional. And it correctly selected the right vocabularies, which we can see from this top level. Articles, picking the article vocabulary type, categories. This one's actually referencing another type of content, image, etc., etc. So it did a really good job, a really thorough job. I can tell you from experience, it does a great job getting required, not required. It does a great job getting the amount of items that a field accepts. If a field is more complex and there's a lot of additional settings, it can get those sometimes. It kind of depends how well those fields are defined on the other side. And even if you were to say like a difference between a long text area and a plain text area, it does a great job with that. But as an example, inside of body, if you wanted to restrict down to specific formats, you'd obviously need to be very explicit about that in terms of in your spreadsheet what you want to allow. It's not necessarily going to take a guess there outside of, again, like plain text. But if you put that in a spreadsheet, it does a pretty good job. It's just not always going to get that. So 28-ish minutes on this test. Other times I've seen it be more around 15 to 20 minutes. The other thing, again, I'd mention, I bet you if you were to have these all within individual agents, you would see this more around like the 5 to 10 minute mark. And we can even do a test. I can show you how quick this can be. Let's do a fresh window with nothing that we can, so that there's no context and history. And let's tell it, come up with better descriptions for my content types. And you'll see how fast it can actually go and call when you don't have a giant context window that it's dealing with. So it's going to list those entity bundles. And it's going to come up with some example ones. And we'll say, yes, sounds good. And earlier when I was talking about like maybe using agents so you can describe your own best practice, this would be a great example, because you could actually show how you like to define things, like the descriptions, like what they should read like. Do you want to include any information about specific fields they have, or maybe pages they're used on, whatever it may be. So it's going through and it's obviously read the information about the bundles, and now it's going to update them one by one. Okay, so let's update all the bundles with the new ones. And so you can see, like, you know, this description is a little bit better than what we had before. Additionally, say you wanted to add another field. In my case, maybe we want to have a place that you can cite the resources you used in your article. We'll go back over here and let's say add a new text area to article called citations. It should be optional. And just like that, it's done. So we now have citations, text formatted long, it's optional. And then what we can also do, just to show you the form side, title, body, display, author, media, image, categories, tags, article type, citations. We're also working on stuff right now, so it'll build out your view modes and your form modes. But right now it's just focused on adding fields to content types and doing that initial configuration. And then obviously as past demos I've showed, it'll do a lot of the stuff on the content creation side as well. So editing and creating new content, deleting content, whatever it may be, adding translation, so forth. So anyways, I appreciate your time and joining me today and watching this. We're hard charging right now to get Tool API to beta. And then from there, we'll push towards a release candidate and a full release. I would love for you to jump in and start testing things. We're in a pretty good place that if you were to start extending tools, the likelihood is becoming less and less of very many changes. So that would have impact the tools you've created. So I'd encourage you to start doing that. And I plan on releasing a video soon to walk you through step by step of what that tool creation process looks like. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you soon.